I am resident of Collinwood for YouTube, joined by my buddy Patrick McCray, my buddy Gordon Dymowski. We are here to review The Invisible Man, starring Claude Rains. This lovely, lovely masterpiece of a movie. They don't make them like this anymore. I wish they would. Uh, but this movie was made in 1933, released.
1933?
90 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
80, was it 90? Is it 91?
Yeah, because 33 is 91.
Some background notes, guys. Following the success of Dracula in 1931, Richard L. Schreier and Robert Florey suggested to Universal Pictures as early as 1931 that an adaptation of H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man would make a suitable follow-up. Both Carl Laemmle and
Laemmle.
Oh, sorry, Laemmle and Laemmle Jr.
No, now, Jewel, I don't do this very often, but you are a horror guy.
Yes.
And as a horror guy, this is a name you want to get right. I promise you. And it's a bizarre German name, but it's pronounced Laemmle, like Little Lost Lamb and Richard Henry Lee. Laemmle, and they were Universal Studios. It was a family business, and they were responsible for the entire Universal horror boom. I think it could be argued they are responsible for horror in American cinema. Not that it wouldn't have been somebody else eventually, but the way we know it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, Carl Laemmle and Carl Laemmle Jr. opted to make a film adaptation of Frankenstein in 1931 instead. While Frankenstein was shooting, Universal bought the rights to The Invisible Man from Wells on September 22nd, 1931 for $10,000. He demanded script approval from Universal. Universal had purchased the rights to the Philip Wiley 1931 novel, The Murderer Invisible, intending to lift some of the more gruesome elements from it to incorporate it into Wells's story. The director first set up the project was James Whale, whom Laemmle Jr. had great faith in. He had directed R.C. Sheriff's play Journey's End in London and New York, and in the 1930 film Journey's End, following the release of Frankenstein, which would break box office records across the United States. Universal had film star Boris Karloff signed to a 5-year contract. On December 29, 1931, the Los Angeles Record stated that Karloff's next film would be The Invisible Man. But January 28, 1932, Well had left the project, wary of being tagged as a horror director. This left Karloff as the only cast member of a film with neither a script nor a director. So, guys, sorry for the long intro there, but when did you guys both first see this movie? Gordon?
Oh, the first time I remember seeing it was when I was a kid. Because here in Chicago, we had Svengoolie, who was then the son of Svengoolie, and they did all of the Universal horror films, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Invisible Man. And so it was kind of one of those where you watch and you go, okay, this is kind of cool. And when you watch it now, you realize I think this is maybe the most underrated of the Universal horror pictures. Because like The Mummy, I think, got transformed in the 90s into kind of an action adventure thing.
Otherwise, and The Mummy's just Dracula. The Mummy's just the same story.
And also, the thing that struck me about this movie is that it's probably one of the few adaptations that sticks really close to the source material, because there's only 2 minor variations, and they're things that were they're really deep cuts. The first
that's the Monocane talking.
Right. I mean, the first is the fact that Griffin in the novel was an albino, because the idea was that this formula that made him invisible because he was already white would, very pale, it would just make him fade. And the other is that when Wells wrote this, he wrote Griffin not as a scientist, but as an anarchist, which politically at that time, it would be like saying you're a communist in the 1950s. It was, but I think here it works a lot better as a scientist who goes a little. I think the messaging not only works, but it's a really well-made film from start to finish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's a movie where, every once in a while, as much as we are big fans of movies with special effects, I think we spend a lot of time talking about the evil of special effects in terms of taking over stories and distracting audiences from shitty scripts and so on and so forth. This is a dazzling watershed moment for cinematic special effects. And I remember I was watching Journey to the West, the Stephen Chow Journey to the West, which, have you ever seen that? Oh, it's really good. And it's based on this Chinese novel that has really eye-popping concepts in it. And as I was watching it, I was watching the special effects, I was thinking, okay, well, this is a worthwhile use of special effects because they can finally make this stuff possible. They can make it believable. And An Invisible Man, wow, especially considering it's 1933. And there's something about seeing a film from back then with such ambition that follows through, that carries it through, that in its own weird way, it's almost like special effects telepathy. I feel like I am experiencing the thrill of audiences back then. And normally it's in poor taste to sort of geek out over the effects, but these are effects of genuine wonder. And, and they did them with essentially certain principles that we kind of still use today. They put a black velvet bag over Claude Rains' head and let him do his business. Black velvet gloves, and they shot him against a black backdrop. And I think it might have even been on the same set. And then they just, I think they took it away. If I'm not mistaken, I think they did it all in camera.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they just ran the film back, ran the negative back and then exposed it a second time. It had to be done at some point, which was a very early effect, but it's just a smart use of this stuff. And to think that movies are only 33 years old as an art form, and they're pulling this off. It's alchemy. It is as much alchemy and kind of wondrousness as what's going on in the film itself. Okay, so I probably didn't see this film in full until around 2009, 2010. I had grown up with parts of it. We didn't have a horror host in Louisville. I had one when I was very young, but he didn't really count. And it was one of those cultural things Louisville was just lacking. And so, yeah, they'd get these horror movies, but they'd put them on at like 2:30 in the afternoon on a Saturday. The summer Star Wars came out, like, before War Paint with Tyrone Power. And it's just the sort of thing where you're playing with toys and maybe you're running in and out of the house and you start out earnestly, like with the Space 1999 episode, you're going to watch it all. And then you see parts of it. And so many movies for the longest time existed like that. So I had a reason to get into the whole Universal thing hardcore and rewatch it. I had very slowly gotten into it because they just weren't available to me when I was growing up. And this was one of them. I had already seen the Ed Begley Jr. parody, which is marvelous. If you've never seen, it's in Amazon Women on the Moon, and it's spot on. And I had already developed an appreciation of James Whale, so I was looking at it for all the Whale players who you see in Bride of Frankenstein. What year is Bride of Frankenstein? Was that after this? If this was 33, and Frankenstein was like, what, 31, 32, something like that?
Looking it up right now.
Wow. I mean, you think how primitive Dracula looks, and that's like 2 years before.
Bride of Frankenstein is 35.
Yeah.
So this was really, what propelled him into that. Journey's End was a very prestigious movie. I think, Whale had really hoped he was going to, because it was the sequel, I think, to All Quiet on the Western Front, or it's the next thing by that author. So Whale, of course, was in World War I, and so he had a lot to bring to it, and it didn't go anywhere. So I think this is where he started to get really political. Really political and really naughty with his fantasy filmmaking. And of course, it's all about being naked in public. Bottom line, which, Jewel, I know doesn't have a lot of wonder for you, because that's something, you apply yourself to all the time and are unseen. So I don't know how you do it, but I tip my hat to you in midair.
Well, Patrick, maybe Jules not invisible because doesn't want to be seen. Maybe it's because people choose not to see him. Just putting that out there.
Gordon, I have a lot higher opinion of people.
I
know they know art.
I live in the middle of nowhere. That's why no one sees me.
So he admits it. The animals don't see you. You maintain the element of surprise. Anyway, it's when I would see little bits and pieces of it as a kid, I think maybe one of the reasons that I didn't really stick with a viewing is that he's kind of like a weird criminal, but he doesn't have big Bond villain. He talks a big Bond villain talk, but never quite goes there. And so I didn't know who to root for, because you want to root for the Invisible Man. It sounds like a superhero. It's like, it's Sue Storm's uncle. And now I see all those things as strengths. And the beyond the special effects, because I have very mixed feelings about Claude Rains' performance. I can't go on and on and on about Addison Powell and how he's the greatest gift to acting, since Thespis, and then turn around and criticize Claude Rains. But Claude Rains is a weird actor. It really, and maybe you need that. Maybe you need that voice, because the other Invisible Man I can think of is Vincent Price, who has one line in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. But it's now I like that moral ambiguity, and I love seeing Una O'Connor. Oh my God, just this hysterical Irish woman in every movie that she's in, and a lot of the other rednecks who show up in the forest. It's like a twisted Disney. I mean, imagine if James Whale had produced the films of Disney and had populated the forest with these strange animated versions of his character actors. So that's scattershot. But those are my immediate thoughts on Invisible Man.
Yeah, well, I think with Rains, part of what makes his performance so unique is he's very gleeful about it.
He loves it.
Yeah, I mean, I think another actor might have played up the, oh my God, I can make myself invisible and be angsty, or be, very much shaking his fist and saying, I'm going to get revenge for. But Rains is like, okay, I'm invisible, and I'm sure Rains was like, I'm sure like with some of the effect shots, he was like off camera with a microphone. He's probably like, I'm earning money to not even be on screen. This is just so damn cool.
This makes me think of the person who I think, if he had been carefully directed, and if he had been, just had the proper intention, who would have made the greatest Invisible Man? Robin Williams. Because, for one thing, he is able to take such glee in things, and he can take glee in things and not free associate. So that's on one side. And then if you look at performances like 1 Hour Photo and Insomnia, where he basically had to insist on no longer playing a doctor who cried in every movie, he can be very chilling. And what a combination that would have made. And of course, as Dark Shadows fans, we got to circle back to Christopher Pennock, because Pennock's John Yeager, absolutely. I bet you dollars to donuts if he were sitting here, he would he would affirm that Claude Rains is one of his inspirations for John Yeager, and just the total glee of absolute evil.
Yeah, I was even thinking that if Dark Shadows had gone on like 72, 73, I could see them in the main timeline doing an Invisible Man riff with Chris Pennock as
Cyrus.
that character. You know, maybe
Well,
it's
yeah,
another lost Collins cousin.
it's well, no, he would have been primary time Cyrus Longworth.
Right. And the great thing would have been they would have figured out, okay, if we're using blue screen, we'll just cover them in blue. Same deal.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For casting on this, guys, Well considered Colin Clive for the film's title role, but he also thought of actor Claude Rains, whom he met at a London performance of the Insect play in 1923. At the time, Rains' career was as a stage actor in New York and London, and Universal discouraged Well from casting him, not wanting an unknown actor in the lead. Rains had been earning so little money from his work on stage, he was considering leaving the theater completely, as he had recently bought a farm in New Jersey. Well had tracked down a screen test Rain, Rains had done for a bill of divorcement, which Rains later described as terrible, saying he was all over the place. I knew nothing about screen
He's
technique,
honest.
of course, and just carried on as if I was in an enormous theater. Now, for filming, principal photography of The Invisible Man began at the end of June 1933 and concluded at late August. All the special effects shot were filmed in what Gloria Stewart recalled as in at most secrecy during production. The special effects work took another 2 months to complete. Universal Press clips falsely claimed that invisible effects were optical effects done with mirrors, while Whale worked closely with John P. Fulton on the film's special effects. Fulton revealed how the effects were done in the September 1934 issue of American Cinematographer, stating that they had been shot against a completely black set of walls, like you guys were saying. So, what's something, because this movie being made when it was made, they did a really good. First of all, Claude Rains. He's not just in this movie; he's in The Wolfman as well,
And Casablanca.
and Casablanca. But he's been in two of the Universal monster movies. Everybody knows Claude Rains from Casablanca. I mean, my God. But with this was not my first Claude Rains movie. I saw it. This movie was actually recommended to me when I was a teenager, and it was recommended to me by my mother. And she goes, "You know what movie you should watch?" I said, "No, what's that?" She goes, The Invisible Man. I said, well, "What year is that from?" She's like, 1933. I said, "When did you see that?" She goes, "When I was a teenager." I was like, "Okay." So I was like, where can I rent this? She goes, "Probably in any video store." So we went to Kit Kat Video, and they had
Love that name.
The Invisible Man. That's where I rented it from.
Jewel, I got to geek out on some names here. So Colin Clive was Dr. Frankenstein in Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. Alcoholic, miserable nut who liked to like fly his biplane like far too close to Hollywood Boulevard. He used to buzz Hollywood in it. And Colin Clive would have been the wrong choice for this, because it would have been exactly, Gordon, what you were saying, would have been the wrong path.
That he would have leaned really hard into the kind of, I'm angry and vengeful, and
though, who the dark horse would have been from the Frankenstein movies to play this part. They never would have cast him. Dwight Fry.
Mm-hmm.
Man, Dwight Fry would have just lit up the screen. as would John Carradine, who appears as a gun-toting redneck in Bride of Frankenstein, busts up the heartbreaking monk sequence. So that's a name. There's the last of these names I'm going to kick to you, Gordon, because I know you know who I'm talking about. Philip Wiley. But also here's something wacky. So now, how did the insect play work in this? Is that what Raines was in when Whale went out to scout him or something?
Hold on.
But anyway, point is, the insect play came up. The insect play was written by a guy named Carol Kapik.
Mm-hmm.
Carol Kapik is responsible for inventing the robot. Literally the word robot. He wrote the play R.U.R. And where the word robot was first appeared.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of some nice geek science fiction cred. And then Philip Wiley, I only associate him with one book. That Shame on Me. So, Joel, you know who Philip Wiley is?
No.
Like a happy Roman, Gladiator.
Which is in the public domain.
And Gordon, if for those who don't know Gladiator, what's its biggest significance and claim to fame?
Well, Gladiator is kind of one of the first real superhero novels. It's very much a precursor to Superman, and there's been a lot of scholarship around how much of an influence it had on Superman, because Siegel and Schuster read a lot of science fiction. And you can see interesting parallels, but you can also see parallels to Doc Savage. You can see a lot of parallels with a lot of stuff, but but Wiley also wrote books like The Savage Gentleman, which is basically about a dad who he gets a divorce, so he takes his son to an island and basically trains him to be super scientific, but not give him anything about women.
Are you kidding? Boy, that's really kidding. Doc Savage. I thought Gladiator was Doc Savage. Hell no, that's Doc Savage.
He also wrote a couple of really interesting books. I know one he was responsible for. One of his last works was, I think it's called like LA 2014. It was a science fiction movie directed by Steven Spielberg in the late 60s, early 70s as part of The Name of the Game.
Ooh. Oh, that was a TV movie.
Yes.
Where the guy's sort of unfrozen and that's a really weird movie with an unlistenable soundtrack. But it's a movie worth watching.
Cool.
Jewel, you'd like that movie. I think you would that movie and Jewel Sains would be an interesting combination. I really mean it. Yeah.
I'll have to go check it out.
YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
Okay. I'll give it a check out for sure. What's you guys' favorite scene in this movie?
Yes. Almost all of them. It's one great scene that follows another.
Yeah. How can you just choose one? Because it is very much a very. I was thinking about this in preparation for this podcast, and imagine if you made this movie without the special effects, which I'm sure you probably could in some ways. You'd still have a solid story. I mean, it would look weird because you'd think, oh, okay, they're doing it with wires, or they're doing things.
Wallace O'Brien could have done it,
right? But you can. But it's a pretty solid story. There's really no narrative fat. Nothing is stagey.
Very, very late point of attack. This is a good example of the concept of late point of attack. And Joe, I'll tell you, this is another screenwriting teacher comes out. You have two ways to go: early point of attack, late point of attack. And it's basically how close to the climax you start the story, or you start the plot. Plot, story, two different things. And this is a prime example. I mean, we're already in the middle of it when it starts, and you have to catch up. And I like that about it. I like movies that do that. Empire Strikes Back does that.
Yeah, this movie doesn't start off with the beginning of the story. You meet this guy. He's walking through this heavy snowstorm, and he walks into this
Gordon, because
tavern hotel.
Because I'm semi-illiterate, I have not read the book. Does the book start out this late into the
Yes, it does.
the tale?
I mean, it
Okay.
is literally like you could almost read the book along with the story, except for the two things that I cited.
That's very bold of Wells, because I think of, stories from this era as beginning of, but you know what? Time Machine does the same thing. He's already got it built. Hell, he has this is only in the world of H.G. Wells is the miniaturized version, the less sophisticated one. You'd think if he could make it miniature, he could just build it into his belt buckle.
Well, if you really want kind of the way Wells thought, okay, you're familiar with The Island of Lost Souls, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's based on the island of Dr. Moreau.
Yes.
And I actually read that for the first time a couple of years ago. And the thing that's interesting about it is that was Wells' reaction to the art of vivisection, which is performing experiments on animals. So when you read it, it's, now, because I always wondered, was Wells like, did he have some weird Count Petofi-esque like magic or sciencey stuff? No, I mean, when Moreau is, when you have the beasts who walk like men, he is like taking actual animals and surgically turning them into humanoid beings, which gives it a real, it's a good kind of queasy, but it's a queasy feeling, if that makes sense.
It's a real ugly story. I mean, in every version of it's weird. The Michael York version is really weird. And I said that I was way too young to see that thing. That's a movie, even though it wasn't gory, just conceptually it was so twisted that's one of the few films I think I was probably too young to have seen.
I like how they handle the blood in this movie. There is some blood in here in this movie. So the way the hotel owner gets busted open.
The one of the creatures in Island of Lost Souls attacks Dr. Moreau with his bare hands. Bear. Sorry.
Yeah.
Came up with that today.
Yeah, this whole movie it's a great watch. Like no one can really pick one scene. The whole thing from start to finish. Claude Rains, they got it right. I mean, from a casting standpoint, what an actor.
I mean, only he could have sired Lon Chaney Jr. Mm-hmm. What on earth was that about? Gordon, it looked like you were about to.
Yeah, I was about to say is that one of the nice things about Claude Rains, his vocal performance, there's a lot of variation in it. You can tell that he is a stage actor because he knows how to connote a lot with just his voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will say his performance in The Wolfman is really interesting. Like the Wolf, like to me, the original Wolfman holds up really well. The remake's okay, like it's not horrible.
No, but Oliver Reed's wonderful.
That's the curse of the. That's.
Do not knock the remake of The Wolfman. I think
that's really no, I'm not remake. Wait,
I'm not talking about
the Joe. You're talking about the Joe Johnson one. Did you ever read the screenplay or find out about, or maybe there was a cut floating around of Joe Johnson's original version of that before the studio started messing with it?
No, I haven't.
It's worth, if you like the Joe Johnson movie, you really like what they originally did with it. It's worth a little bit of Hollywood history spelunking. It's all on the internet. It's even better.
Yeah.
And I think Joe Johnson intentionally got, this refined English actor to be the parent to this hulking, actor from the Americas.
Benicio del Toro, good actor, really good actor. But Anthony Hopkins, great actor, obviously, who they cast in the remake of The Wolfman. But for
Jewel, I'm sorry, you were going to ask what I did or what Gordon
No, I
did.
was just going to ask you, what did you guys think of the Invisible Man remake that Universal did?
I like David McCallum. I think it was a solid show.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We're fucking with you, Jewel.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Elizabeth Moss.
Yeah, that's
movie.
not a good bit.
I have not seen it.
You're not missing much.
It's a movie that would have been better. I mean, for one thing, they did have the guts to come up with a totally different way to do invisibility. The stealth suit kind of thing. It had the misfortune of coming out. I'm sure it was planned. These things are planned years in advance. It had the misfortune of coming out during the Trump administration, right before the pandemic, where the Me Too hysteria was still really cranked up. And it's all about how this invisibility suit is used to wreak havoc on a woman, and it's a violence towards women story. And that's fine. That's okay, great. For me, it was really tough to watch amidst all of the other politics that were going on at the time. And it was an example of Universal and Apple engaging in price gouging in one of America's darkest times, unforgivably. It was one of the first movies that was really rushed. I think it was maybe in theaters 10 minutes, and the pandemic broke out. And so they just put it on iTunes. And they charged something crazy, like $26 for it for weeks, because world's ending, only new movie you're going to have. And it was that was an unforgivable sin against the American people, that was only rescued by Dune being released a few months later, basically for free on streaming. That kind of made up for it. So a lot of baggage with that movie. It's a pretty good movie. It's better than Hollow Man, but
Definitely.
But Hollow Man, despite how awful it is, and it's a wretched film, at least is gleefully honest in how it embraces the perverse implications of the whole invisibility thing. And it's one of the few things, outside something by Milo Manara, that would go there, not in a totally exploitation sense. It's basically about $2 million away from being a made for cable movie.
Yeah. That's not good. That's all I'll say. I'll be nice. It could have been better.
It could have been better. Yeah.
There's things I would have liked to see in it, but I didn't get. But that's
the definition of an invisible man. Stuff you'd like to see, but you don't.
I'll give you my biggest issue with it. It has nothing to do with them going the direction it went. Okay, you have an invisible suit, right? It's set in modern day times. And look, I'm somebody who watches all sorts of shit. Like I'll watch like paranoid shit, theories about this and that. There are people who believe like certain aspects like Bigfoot, UFOs. You mean to tell me that somebody wouldn't believe that somebody made an invisible suit? That they probably would.
I mean, it's not like it was on the front page of the Inquirer.
No,
these are police trying to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you there, but from a standpoint, the cop has to be sensible about this whole thing, and the cop has a kid in the remake. Spoiler alert for Gordon, sorry. But also when you're dealing with a real world consequence type of thing in the remake, it's like, okay, you're telling me nobody believed this woman at all is preposterous. They asked
it's a metaphor for one thing. And Gordon, you would be in a better position to weigh in on how women are believed and not believed when they report certain crimes.
Yeah, it's I'm lucky enough to have, not only to have been in the field, but I have a lot of female friends. As does Patrick. And a lot of times, when women face inappropriate behavior and even fled out, domestic violence type behavior, when they go to the authorities, a lot of times it will be minimized and it will be put as, it's your fault and how can we believe you? And there are people who, and we have encountered this with certain celebrities in the media. It's like, okay, I'm going to use a hot button topic for all three of us. I'm going to apologize in advance.
Go for it.
Joss Whedon. This was a guy who put himself out as, oh, I'm pro women and I write strong women and everything else. And when everybody came to, when it turns out, no, he was actually excuse my language, an asshole. A lot of people still defended him. And people were like, well, how do you do this? How can he be, if he did this, why could he do that? It's I'm trying to think who else would be an appropriate use of, who'd be appropriate.
Harvey Weinstein?
No, because he was just a creep.
Okay. Yeah. You just look at
like
it.
people,
I hate to
he was an
profile,
open
but
secret
look
in
at him.
Hollywood.
Okay.
But the same kind of power balance where it's kind of, how do you report someone who, like, it would be like if we were
school.
Pardon?
Oprah's weird school.
Yeah.
She had that school in Africa with all sorts of weird stuff going on over there. And I'm not some Pizzagate loon. That's not what but this is a verifiable, you have to kind of be Oprah to get away with that.
Yeah. And so, especially when you're talking about like new technology, it's like with AI, a lot of people are like, there are implications of technology that people cannot believe. Like right now, I read this as part of a marketing newsletter, but they there's actually an AI engine that will create a video based on a text prompt.
Okay.
I could, in theory, I could create an AI version of Patrick who announces Dark Shadows is the worst show ever and Joss Whedon is my master.
And maybe I really feel that way. But that's the twist at the end of all of this. Mr. Perry, I have news. Tim Burton forever. Now, Joel, I'll tell you the way that this sort of technology could really screw up the world very easily is a video gets uploaded to YouTube on election day of just something patently false, but looks pretty real. And although it is dispelled within a couple hours, getting that news to everybody and then convincing them that it wasn't real, you have turned over the election. And that's the real danger. That's, we talk about, there's going to be another American Civil War or whatever. And the danger is that it would be insurrectionist. It would be weird little trolling maneuvers. And that's how this stuff goes or might go.
Yeah. I mean, look, I got their concept of what they were doing. Don't get me wrong.
Well, we're not saying we're just riffing at this point.
No, it just, to me, it's like you're asking the audience to believe that no one believes this woman, and that's
that's the whole point of a movie.
No, okay.
It's not called The Reasonable Man.
For those who have not seen the movie, I apologize in advance. The movie, the remake, the guy dies. The guy who abused her, they say he died, but he really didn't. Now, here's a guy who was who this woman literally escaped from to get the fuck away from him. And she moves in with this cop who's a friend of hers who has a kid. And he did tell her that he would one day come for her and she wouldn't even know it. And he does that with this invisible suit. And she's saying, no, he's alive, he's alive. When that's something she was sort of, you could tell in her mind she was suspecting this whole money thing was just some scam by him when she went to the lawyer to begin with. And it's just like, I just think they, to me, from just my standpoint, I'm not speaking for anybody, I just think that nobody believed this woman was a bit, how could he make an invisible suit? Well, he's an intelligent dude. Like, come on.
Oh, Gordon.
Yeah, see the thing is, Jewel, in real life, that happens. You may not believe it, but it does happen. The movie obviously put it to an extreme, but yeah, a lot of times I knew a woman who was stalked by a guy for well over a year, and she had to, and she actually had to remove herself from social activities because he asked her out and she told him no. And these were two people in their 40s. This was not like younger people.
Kids.
And like every time she'd go somewhere, he would show up. And so I don't mean to sound, and if you want to accuse me of being one of those, use whatever wacky slang you want to, I don't care, but
you're talking about actual things. You're talking about actual things that happened. This is not hysteria. This is not speculative. This is not weird accusations. This is stuff that happens. And, the phenomenon is called gaslighting based on the play in the movie. And, there was a point where I thought I was being gaslighted. And I don't know that I was. I would very much like to believe I wasn't. I probably wasn't, but the insidious nature of gaslighting is that not only does it make a crime invisible, the invisible man. I mean, do a gaslighting story about it because it's perfect for it. But it makes you question your own sanity as it's happening, which just allows a perpetrator or the suspicion of a perpetrator to fester even more. And the more you talk about it, the crazier you sound. And when it is done purposefully, which happens all the time in just in little ways, in marriages, and in relationships, and it goes both ways, both genders, it's a horrific event. You are now. I don't want any jokes here. I'm very serious. Jewel, you're married to a very good, grounded, sane woman, and you have benefited from living kind of isolated with this really admirable, hardworking beacon of sanity. You're a lucky guy.
Yes, yeah. No question. Look, my wife is a very down-to-earth person, but look, me and my wife. Okay, my wife grew up here where we live now in the mountains. I grew up in the city. So the reason I say that is this: everybody grows up in different cultures or different places. But when you get into the concept of a story of, okay, here's this rich guy that everybody, and I do mean everybody in that story, knew was rich, and they knew he was intelligent. And yet when this woman tells you, oh, he made this invisible suit, and everybody just dismisses her, it's like, well, wait a second. The guy has money and he's intelligent. Like,
but it's not like he hired a bus or did something that a rich guy could do. I mean, and if it just when she uses the words invisible suit,
right,
that's when we get off the train, because it's like, okay, ma'am, you're crazy. There's no invisible suit.
I'll give a shout out. I did listen to a podcast, the Mr. Ballin podcast, where he was telling this real life story about this girl who was murdered by her best friends. So, good podcast. Go check it out.
Yeah, and let me maybe in relation to the argument, let me say, Drew, you've talked about a franchise where it would easily end where someone just grabs like a gun and shoots the main character in the head. And I'm talking about, of course, Halloween. These are people who hang around waiting rather than just, okay, oh, there's the guy in the bad Shatner mask, grab a shotgun, end of movie.
You know why they don't do that?
Because they can't make another Halloween.
No. Look, I enjoy the Halloween franchise for what it is. I just think if you're gonna tell the story of Michael Myers properly and not just involve, it shouldn't just be centered in Haddonfield, because to me, if this guy's pure evil, he's out there.
Take the act on the road.
But yeah, he's out there killing nonstop. It's not just on Halloween. The movie, the fan film that I sent you explores that a bit. But with the Invisible Man, the original, I enjoyed this movie because A, it made sense. B, it's a great movie. It's timeless, literally. This movie is 91 years old, and it still holds up today.
And there's joy in it.
Yeah.
And by definition, you can't tell the story of the new Invisible Man that they were telling and have it have any kind of joy that the audience can sort of, can like, and it's fun to see Claude Rains take off his pants and run around.
And you have to also consider something, which is this is Universal. The reason they started with Dracula was that they were having business issues. This is also coming at the tail end of Prohibition. So America was ready, not just, they could get booze easily and get it cheap. They didn't have to go to a bootlegger, but this is one of those movies that's like, okay, this is a studio that's like, we know what we do well. Let's do this again, and let's use a property that people may or may not have known at the time. And so, yeah, there is a joy in this, and there's a real sense of, yeah, we're not just doing, it's not a creature movie like, say, Dracula was, or Frankenstein, or The Mummy, or The Wolfman. This is basically a studio saying, what the hell? Let's just go for it. It's worth the money. What can we do? Bomb?
Yeah. Yeah, this movie is a lot of fun. Is there anything you guys want to add about The Invisible Man?
I do have a question, and that is, they made a sequel or two, didn't they? Make like Son of the Invisible Man or something like that?
They did The Invisible Man Returns.
Mm-hmm.
There's The Invisible Woman. And I think there's The Invisible Agent.
How are they?
I think The Invisible Man Returns is okay. I haven't seen The Invisible Woman or The Invisible Agent recently. Pun not intended.
No, I know. Yeah.
Well, Patrick, but Jewel, like he can't believe in the whole, rich guy invents an invisible suit. So, you got to be real careful with him.
Elon Musk is putting chips in people's brains now. I mean, and no one's horrified by this.
Yeah, it's horrific on several levels. Not just that Elon Musk is doing.
Not just that who is doing it, but just that I don't know if this is the time to do it. But in the fictionalized version, everyone like me gets hysterical over this. And then as it turns out, when AI runs rampant, that individual is the Neo. That individual is the only one who can stop it. So let's hope it's like that.
Yeah. What are you guys doing tomorrow night? Is there something you guys want to cover? Anything?
What would be a good, Gordon, I don't know if you're free, but what would be a good companion piece to this, or a good follow-up?
You know what I'm thinking? And this has very little, it's more in the Victoriana. I'm thinking the Rathbone Bruce Hound of the Baskervilles from 39. Because it
I haven't
hits on
seen it since
several
I was in
levels.
4th grade.
Well, luckily, it is on Tubi.
It is.
So let me. Hold on. And let me share with you the link.
That's right before Sherlock Holmes started fighting Nazis, which I love.
Right. It's actually the different studio than the one that where Sherlock Holmes fights not. No, actually, it's the same one. But
is it?
No, it's no different studio because it started at Fox and then went to Paramount.
Okay.
And it's in the chat, so it's on Tubi with several other versions of the story, but we're going to see the 1939 version.
Oh, yeah, sounds great.
What time do you guys want for tomorrow night?
I am not going to Pigeon Forge, I'll tell you that. So whenever, seriously, it was not pretty. When is good?
Is 10:30 good, guys?
10:30 works.
It's fine for me.
So tomorrow night, Hound of the Baskervilles with Gordon and Patrick. We're gonna review that. If you do not own this masterpiece, go pick it up. It is a lovely, lovely movie. It is fun. It is enjoyable. Speaking of enjoyable, links to Patrick McCray's Dark Shadows Daybook about going to be in the description box. Sorry.
And a spoiler for tomorrow night, and kind of a word of warning to Jewel. Okay. I know my Sherlock Holmes. I've written for a Sherlock Holmes related blog. There's a lot in Hound of the Baskervilles that is very gothic, and you don't get to do what you did with the Shadow. I know this stuff, so I'm just.
The number 2 fan of the Dark Shadows Daybook is a member of the Irregulars, Davey Morrell. I don't know if you've ever run into him. God, it'd be great if we get him on. He's great. He's wonderfully cranky too. There was the Sherlock Holmes that was done in the 80s before Granada. And I don't remember. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I'll say
that's
this.
What he likes.
Who played Sherlock Holmes in that one?
I don't. I want to say Michael Ansara, but that's ludicrous. This is the only name that came to mind, like the worst Sherlock Holmes.
Hey, he would have been a great Sherlock Holmes.
He would have. You know who writes a hell of a Sherlock Holmes Sherlockian novel now? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I've never been a Sherlock Holmes fan. So,
this movie will convert you, Jewel. It'll actually get you more towards Sherlock Holmes and away from Halloween.
This was the first Sherlock Holmes movie I ever saw. Now, I watched it up way too late with my mom. It was a very good memory with her. And it was on the late movie on a Sunday night. And she said, I don't care if you got school the next day. You're watching this.
This is also a very interesting novel, but we'll talk about that tomorrow night. So all of you on YouTube, watch.
Read the novel, and we'll see tomorrow.
Link to Gordon Dymowski's Amazon page is going to be in the description box. Link to Patrick McCray's Dark Shadows Daybook about is going to be in the description box. Go pick it up if you haven't already. Good night, guys. See you tomorrow.
Good night.